The following video was brought to you by Audible, where you can start a trial to get a free audiobook at audible.com/bunnyhop. This time, I'm going to be recommending The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, read by Stephen Fry. The narration is hilarious. It's all this super sarcastic deadpan, and you know I'm all about that. You just gotta listen to some of this stuff.
Chapter 6. Howl, howl, gurgle, 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 howl, 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 gurgle, 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 howl, 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 should have a good time.
This book isn't just a classic by its own right. Its sci-fi comedy concept of a unknowably vastly incompetent space bureaucracy was super influential. I actually went my whole life somehow never reading this thing until just a few weeks ago, and afterwards a lot of stuff started to make more sense. I had a lot of moments where I was just like, oh, so that's where that came from. Things like the Stanley Parable, Portal, Rick and Morty, Zero Punctuation, and if understanding the cultural influences of where our media comes from isn't supposed to be one of the goals of the show, then I don't know what is. So with that being said, thank you Audible, and let's get on with the show. The new King of Fighters is coming out, yay! As a new fan of this series, I couldn't be any more excited to just see how it's going to turn out. Its 3D character models might not be as dazzling as the sprites of the last game, but more importantly, the very fact that a KOF 14 is coming out at all signals a very strange and certainly unfashionable shift in this company's direction. KOF is a Shin Nihon Kikaku franchise, and despite the strong arcade gaming force SNK was back in the 90s, the company is now usually remembered for a lot of what seem like quirks. Like its modular arcade cabinets that could swap in and out of multiple games, and the absurdly expensive home console version of that, and this little bit of Clinton-era drug war propaganda, but mostly for really, really good pixel art. But in 2000, around the time their arcade-style pixel art games started to look awfully behind the times, SNK found itself being taken over by alternate interests, starting with a buyout from a company called A-Ruse, who had amassed a huge wealth by making pachinko machines, which led to a zigzagging history of SNK's brands being juggled back and forth from video gaming to pachinko gaming over the new millennium. Rights to the original SNK brands were eventually reacquired by their original founders, who eventually reformed the company, but not without a new president, Koichi Toyama, announcing in 2004 that SNK was, quote, moving its core business focus from games to pachinko slot machines. Although home and arcade SNK games continued to trickle out over the next few years, that finally stopped with KOF 13 in 2010. And that's why the announcement of KOF 14 in 2016 is such a big deal, not just because it's the first new SNK game in 6 years, but also because it's reversing a very stigmatized trend we've seen in the past year. SNK's modest effort to return to KOF does have them ditching expensive pixel art, but they're also ditching their pachinko business entirely, and that move is almost an exact reversal of the Konami situation. This Destructoid article from a couple weeks ago explains why that move might make economic sense. It cites a Famitsu interview in which SNK boss Minori Noguchi says that new Pachislot regulations are one of the main reasons why SNK is going out of pachinko and back into video games. But in this interview, and in the English language media reporting on it, there's little to no effort made to specify exactly what laws changed, what, when, where, and how, and that ambiguity leaves the reasoning behind this move still murky. After all, if Konami's decision to abandon AAA gaming in favor of pachinko makes sense, despite being a hard pill to swallow, then why would SNK's decision to abandon pachinko and return to video games make sense? As it turns out, Japanese government mandates on game design itself might explain this one. Pachinko is a gray market gambling game of little skill in which players bet real money for fake money, which gets exchanged for real prizes, which in turn get exchanged for real money. Gambling is illegal in Japan, but despite Pachislot's remarkable similarities to slot machines in the West, they've been able to operate in a gray market for much of the past century by taking advantage of a few loopholes in the legal logic of classifying it as gambling. For starters, players aren't betting to win real money, as explained earlier, but there's also at least a minuscule amount of skill involved in the game. The objective is to get these balls to drop in the correct holes to trigger chances for prizes, and the speed at which a player drops in their balls affects the likelihood of them hitting the right spot. Players are in complete control of the speed at which balls launch, but all of the ball's journey thereafter is affected by dozens of micro-fine variations in the gravity and physics of each bump, which all might as well be random. In the newer Pachinko machines, you also have mini-games attached that give the player a Simon Says or reflex test that further heightens that skill floor, oftentimes leading to random number generators which create thousands if not millions of other potential gameplay outcomes which all might as well be determined at random. If the player wins, they exchange awarded tokens or balls for a physical prize which can then be sold at an oftentimes partnered business pawn shop for money. Pachinko games use a noisy and elaborate presentation for what is a very, very simple game at heart, one that is not popular to foreign markets while catering to a small and shrinking age demographic at home. The efforts of video game companies to stamp their IPs on Pachinko machines is only one mark to steer its appeal towards younger customers, but the biggest shot it could possibly get is the legalization of Japanese casino gambling in time for the 2020 Summer Olympics, which could open up a whole new segment of products towards a whole new segment of younger Japanese and foreign consumers alike. It's a goal that Japan's Liberal Democratic Party has been trying to push for the past few years, but it keeps getting stuck in political limbo the closer that date approaches. Until then, preliminary moves to get the Pachinko business ready for legalization is also getting it ready for regulation, and that is where the impetus for SNK to leave comes from. The likeliest candidates for the particular changes that spooked them out are talked about in this article, far, far away from the video games industry on a site called gamblingcompliance.com. You have to start a trial account just to be able to read it. It's also almost 2 years old, but the information inside clarifies a whole lot. It cites and translates Japanese industrial reports saying that the Japanese government is set to introduce a new testing regime for Pachinko machines on September 16, 2014. The testing will alter the order of buttons pressed to stop reels and the calculation of a win ratio. One delegate representing the industry says that machines with the assist time and assist replay time modes will require 6 to 8 months to be modified to fit the new rules. This set the whole business back from over half a year of progress, as machines currently on the market had to be altered and ones still in development had to be delayed. One analyst said that, quote, 60% of the installed base is assist time or assist replay time. Those modes are so prevalent that a beginner's introductory brochure to Pachinko categorizes the game in 3 broad strokes, 2 of which fit the definitions of what suddenly needed to be modified. Assist time and replay time are features of digital Pachinko machines that Sammy rolled out as early as 2002. Those terms refer to unlockable bonus modes in which multiple plays can be awarded on a single credit, contests that are typically won through those flashy, noisy minigames playing above any of the falling balls below. And the fact that the government felt the need to regulate the outcomes of these minigames, the win ratios as they reported, shows that when video games become gambling games, they're suddenly subjected to a whole lot more legislative scrutiny. The bounce of a ball falling against a pre-placed peg may be influenced by the developer, but it's ultimately following the physical rules of Mother Nature. On the other hand, random numbers generated by a computer are invisibly manipulated by nobody other than the developer. With Pachinko machines having to comply to government changes on a design level in order to make the games more fair, and with the prospect of the industry facing much heavier taxes if it does become officially reclassified as gambling, we can finally see why SNK would be hesitant to stay in that business over the years to come. Where Konami sees higher profits and lower expenses, SNK may be seeing higher taxes and more red tape, which would be more of a financial burden for a small, specialized underdog like SNK than a multiple industry conglomerate like Konami. The rule changes made to the assist time and replay time rolled out in September 2014. In August of 2015, SNK announced its new acquisition by a Chinese holding company who aimed to do a Marvel formula of making a cross-media event out of their next big IP, which turned out to be King of Fighters 14, as announced in September. Then in October, third-party sources started noticing that SNK wasn't planning any new Pachinko businesses, rumors that were then confirmed in November with their announcement of slashing its Pachinko focus entirely to focus on console and smartphone gaming instead, as exhibited by a crazy Humble Bundle deal in December, and then these words about the changing laws in January. The turning point being September 2014 makes a whole lot of sense. However, do know that despite a bunch of efforts to contact them, SNK was totally non-responsive about commenting on the story, which seems weird considering the positive nature of it. Why didn't they answer? I don't know, beats me. Maybe their few English staffers just didn't have a lot of free time to throw around the past couple weeks. Fans are interpreting this move as good news, as SNK exploits its worldwide popularity against the more localized market for Pachinko. So maybe if the next KOF does well, then they'll be able to afford to make some new sprites for whatever's next.
Okay. Ready.